What's your emergency?
I'm just calling to let you know I've tried everything and I cannot find anything.
What's wrong?
I can't get bigger rigs unless it's hurting my back.
Have you contacted Pro-Aim?
There are rewards that come with making a good cinematic sequence, but there's also hardships. Mainly the struggle that it takes.
Look, the research is out. As we're seeing, the past several years, there has been an uptick in back surgeries among those film producers whose rigs are growing ever so much, Lee.
I can't make videos anymore. It really hurts my back.
The rise in camera gear sales over the past 10 years does not coincide with the number of gym memberships we've seen.
I sold all my gear because I couldn't handle the back strain that comes with filmmaking.
I'm done with filmmaking. My hospital bills are through the roof.
I needed a better setup. I was desperate.
Well, I think what you have to do is read the data.
What happens when you have bigger rigs, more gear, more sophisticated setups? I'm going to show you how this video rig can help you achieve some really brilliant video shots while being in complete control of your focus, alleviating the strain on your back, being able to put a big monitor on top so you can look at it, and just go on shoots longer, and why you may need a similar setup if you're at that point in your filmmaking journey. If you're not there yet, you will be sooner than you think. If you really hone in on your craft, you gain that experience, and you network. You're gonna see your gear bank grow faster than the ZV-1 runs out of battery. I'll never forget how happy I was when I got my first full-frame camera back on October 27, 2019. I was so happy, and I'm already at a place right now where I don't have enough space for my gear. And as my gear bank grew, so did my standards for shooting video and my methodologies that I was using. It's one thing if you just go out to shoot some B-roll with the gimbal, but it's another thing if you're going out with a heavy rig to shoot all day long. You may ask, well, why would I even want or need a bigger rig? And it's not about wanting or needing a bigger rig. It's about wanting a better shot, a better camera, and a better setup. By the way, this video is being sponsored by Pro-Aim, but they did not tell me what to say, and they gave me complete and utter creative freedom. And I live by honesty because there's no other way to live than the way of the truth. I'll leave everything in the description so you guys can have a look. I've seen other guys out in the field wearing these things before, and I couldn't tell what it was. I knew it had to do with the camera, but I didn't know why they needed it. But I did know that it looked sick. Like, anyone who has this rig is not playing around. It's like instant respect from everyone who sees somebody wearing this rig, both inside the filmmaking community and normal people. But who cares what it looks like? We want to see how it's used, who it's for, if it's beneficial, and if it actually works or it's just a gimmick. Don't worry, we're gonna cover all of that. I configured this thing with an underslung gimbal. We're gonna throw a cage on it to mimic an expensive cinema rig. We're just gonna talk about it and see how it fits and if it could actually be used in a real world situation, and some negatives that I find with it. To start off, let's talk about price. Right now, as of the time of recording this video, Pro-Aim is selling this rig for $914, and it can hold between 9 and 27 pounds. But if your rig isn't that big, then you can get the Flycam Flowline starter, and that starts at $370, and it can hold between 6 and 16 pounds. I ended up asking Pro-Aim for the placid arm attachment just to give me a little bit more stabilization if I'm walking. If I wanted to get this rig with the placid arm attachment, then you're looking at $1,300. It seems like a lot, but it really helps with those long day shoots and also a lot of those up and down movements when you walk. That was one of the benefits of my DIY stabilizer. I'll leave a link to that one in the description. The build quality of this thing is definitely solid. They were not playing around when they designed it. It's not some cheap crap. The padding is well made, and the straps seem to have really strong stitching, and the string that holds the camera up seems to be very strong. The waist goes from 32 inches to 49 inches, so it could really fit anyone. They also sent me a Film City DSLR camera cage with a matte box so that I could attach the camera and as many attachments as I needed. Just to give you a quick rundown of my setup, I have a focus knob for manual focus, a large monitor, a handle, and a shotgun mic. All right, Joe, enough with the small talk. Just hit us with it.
This is an excellent setup if you want to do
almost like handheld shots. So if I walk with this cage, you can see a little bit of movement as opposed to if I was using the gimbal. Once you start to build out your rigs and they get really heavy, that could really induce back pain. So I already have a bad back. I get headaches and stuff like that. There's no way I'd be able to hold a setup like this for an entire day or a long day's shoot. So this thing just completely prevents me from having a lot of that back pain. Another reason why this thing is nice is because a heavy setup like this, after a little bit of time, will start to make your arms shake because it's so heavy. So this just kind of free floats in the air and you can just hold on to it and kind of guide the camera the way that you want it to go. Maybe in the beginning of the day, you'll be able to handle a rig like this, but by lunchtime, you're gonna be hurting. You also have the focus puller here, so it gives you the ability to manually focus. When I'm shooting something that's moving and maybe my focus is trying to focus on like the truck, I can actually manually focus on the rim of the tire. Maybe that's what I'm trying to focus on. So it makes it a lot easier rather than trying to fumble around with autofocus. If I really wanted to be slick, I could add a V-mount battery to this setup. It would make it a little bit heavier and a little bit more straining on the back, but then I could have a battery that would last my entire day because I could hook it up to my monitor, my camera, and maybe any accessories that I want to add to it. Artistically speaking, this cage setup is made for like handheld shots. So anything that's really moving, like action or sports, or something like that. That's what I would use this setup for, because you're not gonna get 100% stabilized footage, but it does still give you that handheld look. If you did try or want to walk with this setup, then I would recommend either sitting on a chair and having somebody push you, or maybe getting a pair of rollerblades. But truthfully speaking, if you are looking to get that nice glide shot, then I would pick up a gimbal and just flip it upside down, like invert it, and then you can walk and have that nice steady, straight shot. In fact, let's get some shots with the gimbal to see how smooth the footage looks. Now you do lose the ability to have your focus puller on the side here, but usually I'll use this setup to get kind of like B-roll shots, and if that's the case, then I'll just use the touch screen and autofocus on whatever it is that I'm shooting and just maybe do 60 frames per second and then be able to slow it down in post to make sure everything's in focus. This might be my preferred setup. It's so light. This is the DJI RS2, but you could really use any gimbal that inverts because it gives you that nice smooth footage, and I really don't even need to hold the gimbal at all, just kind of in place. Something like this really helps out, especially if you're going over like rough terrain surfaces. If you are gonna pick up this setup, whether it's the cage or the gimbal, then I highly recommend you also pick up this quick release knob. It's super simple and easy and fast. I had that DIY stabilizer in the past, so I actually had something to compare this to. I think the main difference between that DIY stabilizer and this body rig is this body rig seems to be a little bit more freeing. I feel like I don't need both hands on the rig at all times. I just kind of let gravity do the work. Once you get the hang of how this thing operates, you can get some really good natural looking video. The DIY stabilizer helped with those up and down movements while you walked, and you can still see the up and down a little bit with this body rig, but it gives you that natural look, that handheld look. If you were to go indoors with that DIY stabilizer, then it might be a hazard because it tends to swing a lot. But with this body rig, I think that you would have a lot more control. You just have to remember that that arm is sticking out and you don't want to hit like door trim. The DIY camera stabilizer footage looks like the camera's just floating through the air, whereas this body rig gives you kind of like that handheld look. Of course, both rigs take a lot of weight off of your back. The heavier your rig, the more strain your back is gonna have. This rig gives you the ability to manual focus with that focus knob, whereas that DIY stabilizer, I couldn't really figure out a way to get manual focus or a knob in a certain place where I could reach over the arm and adjust the focus. I know companies make radio follow focus, but it's just an extra step in my workflow. I like to just pull my rigs out and start shooting. I don't know if this is a long-term negative, but I noticed the heavier my rig was, the more the back portion of the rig dug into my back, and it became a little bit uncomfortable. But when I was flying with the gimbal, there was no issues at all. It was really when I started to add all of my attachments to that cage and it became pretty heavy. I wish they attached the arm to the body vest itself, because when I lift it up, it always comes out of the slot and then I have to put it back in. It's just a minor inconvenience and minimal compared to the amount of advantage that you get with this rig. So who is this rig for? It's for anyone who goes on long day shoots, anybody who shoots promotional videos, who's gonna be on set for longer than a couple hours, somebody who has a very heavy cinema rig, or someone who likes to deck out their camera, put a cage on it, and all types of accessories. Because as you add accessories to your camera, it gets heavier and heavier. And maybe in the first hour or two, you're fine, but at a certain point, you're gonna start straining. All right, that was a lot of information, but I think we covered everything. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. A big thanks to ProAim. I'm Joe with Filmalliance, and I'll talk to you on the next video.
Let's wait for this guy to pass. Hurry up!
The data speaks for itself. Did you know that the back surgeries over the last several years among filmmakers has increased dramatically by at least 1.5%? And yes, that's a lot.
Artistically speaking, this setup with the cage is really made for that okay, right? External microphone and maybe other things that...
Rigs are growing ever so muchly. Well, yeah, ly, muchly, yes.